we are going to tell you exactly everything we know about the next Mass Effect game, which might be Mass Effect 4, including all the stuff that has been confirmed or changed due to the N7 day reveals this year. This is basically confirmation on everything. So there's a lot of speculation out there, Sam. What do we know is absolutely safe and concrete?
There is a ton of speculation out there. I'm very, very tuned into Mass Effect social media, but I think it's safe to say, more than safe to say, this appears it will be a sequel, not a prequel, not an interquel. And, I'm hear from a lot of people. Why? Why do you think that it looks like it's going to combine Mass Effect Andromeda with the Milky Way, maybe? I don't think so. And it all comes down to the timeline. What do we know about the timeline? In the N7 day video and image that was released by BioWare this year, it has a date, 11_7_90. Of course, that's November 7th, but the interesting part here is the year. Why did they leave out the first two digits? They want us to speculate. But we can most certainly rule out that that year is not 2090. It's also not 1990, although Nirvana and Mass Effect would be pretty sweet.
Yeah, they didn't quite hit big yet until like 91, but yeah, the early fans would be like, I saw them at a concert in Seattle back in 1990. Yeah, I don't think that's what we're getting.
Birth of grunge in Mass Effect.
Yeah, grunge comes back a few centuries from now.
It's cyclical. So 2090, no, I don't think so. This is important because it virtually rules out the game will take place before Mass Effect 1. So for everyone who is holding out hope for a First Contact War game, I don't think so. Maybe some flashbacks in the next one, but largely I don't think so. By 2090, humanity hadn't even discovered Mass Effect physics yet, so no FTL travel, no discovery on Mars. There was none of that. Humanity was not part of the galactic conversation when it came to geopolitical affairs. So 2190, 2290, hell, 2890. Maybe my guess is 2190 because Mass Effect Andromeda began in 2185. That's when the Arcs set sail. Of course, it took them 600 some years to actually reach Andromeda. Yeah. But that technology was still from 2185 at the latest Milky Way technology. So 2190 makes sense because it's in the reconstruction period after the original trilogy, that being 4 years after Mass Effect 3. And regardless of the ending that you picked, this is the interesting thing to me, because there's so much debate of, they're not going to canonize an ending. How could they canonize an ending? Or if they are canonizing an ending, it better be mine. Well, regardless of that ending that you picked, you're either going to have dead Reapers or you're going to have Reapers who are around and cooperative. So either way, you can reverse engineer those relays that were destroyed, making building a new relay entirely plausible. They built the Crucible in like 4 to 6 weeks, and that had never been done before.
Yeah, they're going to have the know-how, the ability, and more importantly, the drive to do it, and the need to be able to get out across the galaxy again.
Was that a pun? Was it an intentional pun? Drive, FTL drive, Mass Effect
it wasn't,
drive.
It wasn't, but I'll take credit anyway.
We'll roll with it. So the other thing is, yes, like you said, there's no impending doom. So it seems kind of plausible that people would be able to work faster without the constant threat of genocide lingering over their head. So there's that. We know that, I think, about the timeline. It's safe to say not a prequel, not an interquel. I was terrified that it was going to take place at Mass Effect 2.5, maybe, the two years where Shepard's dead.
Yeah, I don't think
that's going to happen.
No.
Now, the year is clearly ending in 9-0. Don't know what that year is. And the technology that appears to be in this N7 day artwork looks way too similar to what we saw in the original trilogy for me to even speculate that technology has stagnated for 600 years and that this is actually in 2890. Come on.
No, I don't think so. No. I don't think they'll do that.
Okay, so next point, something we definitely know. Even more than that, this part has been confirmed by BioWare. It's single player. It's not multiplayer. There may be a multiplayer game mode, but the primary aspect of this game is single player. And like you said before, this makes sense because they're leaning into what worked. what
Right.
fans loved about this series.
Right. Most people played the single player. Some people did the multiplayer. So give them a single player and then maybe tack it on later in a DLC, or maybe make a whole other game that's very only focused on multiplayer. But yeah, they absolutely are doing what they know is going to sell because it's a business.
Mass Effect, inverse of Call of Duty. Most people buy Call of Duty to play multiplayer. Most people buy Mass Effect to play the single player story. That's just the way it is.
Right.
And so this part is confirmed. They said, we're excited to bring you the next single player Mass Effect game. So everyone who was worried that Mass Effect, the next one could be like Fallout 76 or No Man's Sky, I don't think you have to worry about that kind of thing.
No. And one of the only reasons, and this is kind of a side note, one of the only reasons 10 years ago they included a multiplayer component on Mass Effect 3 was because that was the trend at the time. The thought was, if we include multiplayer, then one, we get people continuing to play the game more often, so they're going to buy other stuff. And then two, it also makes it harder to pirate, because you can't play the multiplayer with the pirate version of the game, because when you log on to servers to play multiplayer, it's going to, well, you can, I mean, you can always find workarounds, but for the most part, for the average user, it's a lot harder to pirate the game. So
yes. And we also know that this next game is being developed in Unreal Engine 5.
Yes.
I am so psyched for that. I mean, you've seen a lot of stuff from Unreal Engine 5, of course, from different games, but it looks fantastic.
No, it's very capable. It also will cut down on development time because they don't have to focus so much on developing the actual engine of the game. I'm sure they'll tweak the Unreal Engine 5 in ways that they need to do what they want to do. But that means faster development, and it's a very capable engine. I think it's going to look awesome.
Right. It's not going to be like Starfield, where they built that engine from scratch, they said, right?
Well, they basically took the creation engine, which is the Skyrim and Fallout engine that they've been using for years, and they've continued to iterate on it. So it's like a car. So like maybe from Skyrim to Fallout, they replaced the tires and the gave it a new polish on the outside, right? For Starfield, they've basically now gutted the entire thing. Like technically, there's no component that hasn't been upgraded or changed from the original engine.
Yes, and this is not part of the engine discussion for Mass Effect, because it is Unreal Engine 5.
Right.
And so, like you said, they're going to tweak things that are going to work better for the game, but overall, brand new engine, and it's not the Frostbite engine that Mass Effect Andromeda used.
Right.
And I think that engine is to blame for a lot of the visual quirks that people did not like the "my face is tired." And and the terrible animation quirks from that game. There were a lot of things to blame, I think, on the Frostbite engine and trying to mash that in to a RPG heavy game. We don't have to worry about that. Unreal Engine 5 is the engine for this next game, and it looks fantastic. If you haven't seen stuff, go look it up. We also know there's Mass Effect veterans coming back for the development on this series. We've known for a while now, Mike Gamble, the project director, he's worked on previous Mass Effects. He knows what's up. He knows, he has that contextual knowledge of the game series. I think we're in safe hands with him. I just learned recently from this In7Day blog post that Parrish Lay is now the new, the creative director, franchise creative director. Now, if you are a Mass Effect fanatic, you might recognize this name, Parrish Lay. He's the mustachioed man who was well known for being the Mass Effect 3 cinematic director. The cinematography in Mass Effect 3 was incredible. Mm-hmm. It was amazing. It made that game have such poignant, impact, right? Yeah. So I'm very encouraged by this. The fact that they brought the cinematic director for Mass Effect 3 and now he's working on the next game. Can you imagine how great that's going to look on Unreal Engine 5?
Yeah, or at the very least, it's just going to feel right. It's going to feel familiar. It's going to feel like, oh, this is what Mass Effect feels like, because it's the same guy doing the same stuff.
Exactly. And now he has even greater purview over the entire series. And there's also some new and tenured game devs who are joining the team, and they've hired a mission director who used to work on Mass Effect Andromeda. Her name is Jess Hara Campbell. So if you liked the way, and mission director is a much more gameplay oriented position, if you liked the way that those missions went in terms of structure in Mass Effect Andromeda, then I think you've got a lot to look forward to. But in terms of, narrative or any of the other main gripes that I heard about Andromeda, that doesn't really fall under her direction. Right.
All right. So what else do we know?
So Liara is alive.
Yep.
And continues to be.
Yeah.
This is like now the second or third iteration of teasers for the next Mass Effect in which Liara is not just alive, but we have new voice lines from Ali Hillis, who voices Liara, and continues to be featured in prominent roles. Given the date 11/7/90, like we talked about before, it means this game has to be 2190 or afterwards. Otherwise, Liara is an infant by Asari standards because she was born in 2077.
Yeah.
So
that
yet another indication, definitely not a prequel. And it makes sense to have Liara, who was the Shadow Broker by the end of Mass Effect 3 and survived, no matter what ending you picked, she survived. It made sense in a post-Mass Effect 3 universe why the Shadow Broker would be playing such a major role when there's a huge power vacuum.
Oh, absolutely. Like she's in the race too.
She is the power broker.
Right. We talk about this in like previously, but like if Cerberus is here with the N7 reveal and they're making a mass relay, then it's absolutely in her interest to be like, okay, what are they doing and how do I counter it?
Right. And maybe the next Mass Effect you're playing as a protagonist. Don't know who the protagonist is, but what if you're trying to make peace and stabilize the galaxy between all of these different warring factions that are trying to assert control over this power vacuum in the Milky Way? And who's caught in the middle of that? Liara. Maybe you're not going to be friends with Liara.
Yeah, maybe there's some things she's doing that are dubious now. And you're just like, okay, listen, you're going to cause problems. You're going to create wars. Yeah.
Right. This division that we already had seen so many times throughout the previous Mass Effects of the rest of the Milky Way galaxies resenting humanity for being too arrogant, too power hungry. Maybe this is going to come to a fruition and you're going to be caught in the middle as someone saying, we disavow Cerberus, but hey, we're still legitimate.
Yeah. Don't judge all of humanity on what those guys are doing.
And man, that seems so poignant with today's political sphere.
God.
But
yeah.
There's also familiar technologies and Milky Way races that have been released, not just in the video that we saw, not just in last year's N7 Day, but some artwork that has been released by the BioWare Mass Effect team. And one of those that I want to bring up is this artwork that was tweeted out by Mike Gamble. And we can see here a number of things. We can see sky cars. The sky cars look exactly the same as the original trilogy, indicating that I don't think too much time has passed since the original trilogy's end, because clearly I think sky cars, primary modes of transportation, once you're in a hub, those would probably get some substantial technological upgrades if you were passing 100, 200, 300 years, right?
Yeah.
So they would look different, but these look identical. We also see a Turian here in the foreground, and if you zoom in there, it looks like the Turian is wearing a breathing apparatus. You can see a blue electronic light and a pipe or some type of tubing coming from his back and onto his front, and it definitely looks like a breathing apparatus there. So Turian, familiar Milky Way race, going to be appearing in the next one. If you zoom in a little bit more in the background, we see what looks to be a Solarian also wearing a breathing apparatus, and a Krogan facing away from the camera with a tube coming from his back to his front. So perhaps, environmental hazards are going to be a matter in the next Mass Effect. We don't know exactly where this artwork has taken place, but we do see some newer looking technology with some spires and what would appear to be maybe, Mass Effect technology powered space elevators. The beams extending upward, they look exactly like the beam at the end of Mass Effect 3 when Shepard's rushing toward the beam to be, beamed up to the Citadel. So in a post-Mass Effect 3 world, I think the races would probably look at that technology and say, hey, we have instantaneous space elevators. We should use those.
Yeah, that seems handy as well.
Quite possible. And, this planet looks very Omega-esque with the exception of some smooth Asari-looking architecture. However, there are apparently hazardous conditions that are requiring multiple races to use breathing apparatuses. So I'm not sure where the setting is there. Second piece of artwork, we discovered this. It looks like a generic promo favorite store in the Citadel, right? Mm-hmm. And it's in the N7 Day blog. But if you zoom in a little bit, you see the Citadel, clearly the Citadel, and the Citadel arms extending toward the viewer. However, there's no Presidium Tower. There's no council chambers right in the middle of that center Presidium ring. That makes sense in a post-Mass Effect 3 world, or galaxy rather, because the Crucible would have annihilated that when it sent off its final blast, right? So no Presidium Tower. And for tens and tens of thousands of years, for as long as we know before Mass Effect 3, Citadel Tower was always there. So not quite sure what happened to it, but it's not there in that image. And there also appears to be a moon.
Yeah. I mean, just looking at it, it appears like maybe there's a planet in the fuzzy looking background, and then there's a moon up closer. Is that what you gather too?
Yeah, that's exactly what I gather. You can't really tell what the planet is in the background, and I think that's intentional, but very clearly a moon or a small orbital body. It's very small compared to the Citadel. And last we knew in Mass Effect 3, the Citadel was in orbit around which planet?
Yeah.
Our planet.
Yeah, maybe that's Earth. Maybe that's Earth and the moon.
Maybe that's Earth.
Yeah.
And maybe that's Luna. So I'm not sure, but very sneaky of them to put that in there in what would appear to be nothing more than a link to the BioWare store. So very interesting there. I think, this is we're getting away from concrete. This is my speculation, but I think there's an ample amount of evidence to suggest that this is, I'm not sure how long after the original trilogy, but it is post Mass Effect 3.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It all seems to be adding up to that.
Exactly. And, we've mentioned Cerberus. I think people are probably getting bored of us mentioning Cerberus. However, I think Cerberus or the remnants of them are likely to be a key player from what we've seen so far. You combine, the Cerberus colors of this relay being constructed. You combine Liara's words in the recent trailer, human defiance, and the council will be furious. Of course, council will be furious about Cerberus because Cerberus is not exactly friendly to anyone except for humans. And even then,
even then they do some terrible things.
And, I just finished my most recent playthrough on N7 Day. I forgot that the Elusive Man says there at the very end in your last interaction with him, you can kill me, but you'll never kill Cerberus because it's an idea.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Ideas live on like viruses.
Yeah, you can't kill an idea. And I think I think the U.S. military discovered that in the 20 years they were in Afghanistan. You can't kill extremism as an idea. You can't. It's pervasive, and sometimes your own presence there is the reason that it's continuing. But that's a different topic for another day because we're talking about power vacuums, ironically relevant, but power vacuums and post-war distrust of aliens. Mm-hmm. Can you imagine how that would skyrocket after the Reapers invaded?
Oh, yeah. It doesn't matter how many of the aliens were helpful. Oh, my God, aliens landed on our planet and tried to destroy us. Aliens are bad. That's going to be the natural reaction.
Right. And this is the first alien invasion of Earth ever.
Yeah.
So, and not just that, but it's incredibly destructive. I would venture to guess that most of humanity was killed.
Right.
And so that gives the context or the pretense that an extremist organization like Cerberus would need in order to boost recruitment efforts.
Absolutely. And they would expand that to all sorts of other things that don't even apply and probably create misinformation. If it wasn't for all these other alien races, then we wouldn't have to deal with the Reapers to begin with. And it's like, well,
exactly.
That's not true, but they would use that.
Our own human shepherd had told them for years that the Reapers were coming and they didn't listen. So we don't trust them anymore. And, maybe the other aliens wanted humanity to be taken down a peg.
Right. Why do you think our Earth got attacked in the beginning of the conflict instead of towards the end? Well, yeah, exactly.
Here's an out of context soundbite from the sorry counselor saying that, humans were too power hungry.
Right.
The list goes on. And I think you combine this with the new narrative director, Mary DeMarley's involvement in her past with Deus Ex. And it seems on brand that a futuristic extremist militant corporation would be a big player, right?
Absolutely. No, it totally makes sense. And it resonates again. Like these games, we've talked about this before on previous episodes. They were predictive in some ways, like socially, like culturally, and to plug into things that are still true and actually happening in our own society, but doing that in a fantasy sci-fi kind of setting. It's par for the course.
For all the I think that you kept up with Star Trek. I'm not sure if you were a huge Star Trek fan, but
not great. But
you were aware of the cultural zeitgeist that it had,
yeah.
and I'm so sick of people saying sci-fi. Why is sci-fi becoming woke? Sci-fi has always been woke.
Sci-fi and fantasy have both always been woke. Like, absolutely. Like Star Trek in the 70s, having a diverse cast from different races and cultures and genders doing all sorts of important things and being badasses on their own. That was a 60s, 70s thing. Like, yeah, okay, so they were woke back then, or maybe they just happened to be, real about humans being awesome, regardless of where you come from. Yeah. Right.
And how that ties into Mass Effect, I see it entirely plausible that the next Mass Effect is going to, with different names and different people in fictional places, in fictional settings, bringing up very real themes that are affecting us today. Those being misinformation, supremacist groups, you name it. And who falls into that category more than Cerberus?
Absolutely. No, it totally makes sense. And that will resonate. That will actually help the series do better because it feels real. It addresses real things. It just works. You don't have to reinvent the way people interact and society functions. We're seeing it play out. That's why the show references things that happen in the history and how they correlate with things happening in the game.
Yeah.
That's how you make a fictional world feel real, is you take real situations, real themes, and you put it in the fictional world. You don't just try to invent something out of nowhere. You don't need to.
Exactly. And if there was a sci-fi game with no social commentary on what we're going through in our real life, it would likely feel too alien. Ironically.
Right. Or not real. It would just not feel real at all. Like, imagine not having a power vacuum and not having extremist groups do things. It would be like, why don't they have that? Wouldn't that be a thing?
It'd feel too utopic.
It would feel, too utopic, and it would not feel plausible at all. The backlash you'd get from people later on would be, why are the writers so bad? Right?
Yeah, well, we heard that once before with Mass Effect Andromeda. But, looking back on the past and 2 Christmases ago when we got that first official teaser trailer, and actually it was the subject matter for which we did our first episode of the Lorecast. Mm-hmm. I think we can look back on that with a lot more clarity now, because the big question we had back then was, is Shepard alive? And I think the big question we have now, looking back on that and knowing what we know now, is how much of that original teaser trailer was actually copacetic, because the game is still in pre-production right now. Yes. Back then, I don't think it was even in pre-production. I'd be surprised if they had a one-pager on what they want the story to be. So back then, now looking back at it, I don't think that we can deduce a lot from that original teaser trailer, the one with Liara picking up the N7 helmet plate from the snow and dusting it off. I think they were just summoning images that were familiar to the players. They were kind of saying, oh, you remember this? You remember this? And hyping up the series before Mass Effect Legendary Edition dropped, just to let everyone know we are aware of what you loved about the series. We know that you love it, and you've got more stuff that you love coming.
Right. Yeah. All it would take is them saying, when does it take place? Who is still alive? And what is meaningful to bring up in a trailer? And then you make the trailer. That's it. They don't need to have it all fleshed out yet.
And they didn't even have all of those details fleshed out. So, and they didn't need to. And I think that they've been tiptoeing a very fine line. And I think that their marketing team, God, I don't envy their marketing team, because they have to make sure that they're not getting ahead of the development team, like we saw in Cyberpunk.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a balance there. Yes.
Yeah. But that is virtually everything that we know so far about the next Mass Effect and what has changed in the time since, in 7 days, now 6 days since we're recording this. And I gotta say, I am very excited for the next Mass Effect. I don't care if Shepard is the next protagonist. We did mention the N7 reflection in the glass. I'm going to say it again. It doesn't necessarily mean that Shepard is going to be back, but I think it does mean that they're telling us the N7 operatives are going to have a role to play.
Yeah. Again, it just totally makes sense. It's like, why wouldn't they? if there's humans involved, they're going to be involved. As long as they still exist, which seems like they do.